to invite me for this prestigious conference, to give me this opportunity to be here. My talk today is 10 mistakes we do while performing echocardiography in heart failure. So what echocardiography can offer in heart failure? One, it allows you to diagnose heart failure and separate it between heart failure with reduced ejection fraction versus heart failure with normal ejection fraction, measurement of ventricular volumes, quantification of biventricular systolic and diastolic function, hemodynamics and intracardiac pressures, and also tells you about some prognostic markers in heart failures. It also guides you for therapy like CRT or revascularization. There is a new classification of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction and heart failure with normal ejection fraction were with us for a pretty long time. And our new entity has emerged called heart failure with mid-range ejection fraction. These are the people with an ejection fraction between 40 to 55. And heart failure with normal ejection fraction, that is ejection fraction 55% or above, are now reclassified or subclassified into two types: with structural heart disease, that is with reduced GLS, and without structural heart disease with normal GLS. GLS is global longitudinal strain. Why one does mistake? Very simple. Poor understanding of physiology. If you are in a hurry, or if you have no attitude and passion for the technique of echocardiography, you tend to commit mistakes. And in a busy echocardiography laboratory, when the quantity, that the number of echocardiograms are far too many, then you lose the quality. And that is true for all walks of life. Now let me concentrate on mistake number one. Estimation of left ventricular ejection fraction by two-dimensional echocardiography alone without using contrast or 3D is one serious mistake you can do. And I will tell you why. Left ventricular volumes and ejection fraction by 2D echo by biplane Simpsons has been an established method and is practiced in majority of the echocardiography laboratories. But this requires one, correct visualization of endocardial border. Two, it is based on geometric assumptions like the left ventricle is of ellipsoid type. It works best in symmetric ventricles. If you have a ventricle with apical aneurysm, a basal or inferior aneurysm, something like that, then it doesn't work. It markedly underestimates left ventricular volumes by close to 30% and ejection fraction by around 3 to 5%. So this is the standard method of biplane ejection fraction by Simpson's method. Then comes left ventricular volumes by 2D contrast. When you use a contrast, endocardial definition is very, very superior as compared to unenhanced 2D echo. Unenhanced 2D echo is known to underestimate left ventricular volumes and ejection fraction. So contrast enhanced 2D estimates left ventricular volumes, which are comparable to three-dimensional echo and CMRI in several studies in the past. So this is the typical image of a contrast enhanced left ventricular image. You can see clear definition, endocardial definition between the cavity and the myocardium. And therefore, you can estimate volumes very, very well. Moreover, sometimes as hitherto unsuspected abnormalities in the 2D echo can come to your attention. For example, this patient had a left ventricular apical thrombus, which we did not even see on a two-dimensional unenhanced echocardiogram. Then comes the 3D echo. 3D echo estimates global left ventricular function. It sees the ventricle as it is. It has no geometrical assumptions. And it measures the endocardial points at 700 different points in the ventricle, and therefore is far more accurate in measuring left ventricular volumes and left ventricular ejection fraction. However, I understand that 3D echo may not be available in all echo labs. Wherever it is not there, use contrast, and it will add volumes of information about ventricular dimensions, ventricular ejection fraction, and volumes. Second mistake, not looking at GLS. Please remember, global longitudinal strain has become now a standard parameter to be measured whenever you are estimating left ventricular systolic function. The left ventricular myocardial strain is the rate of deformation of the left ventricular myocardium per second. And this rate of deformation is calculated as a myocardial strain. Myocardial strain, normally left ventricular global longitudinal strain is now fairly well established. The normal values are minus 18 to minus 22. And the MRI equivalent EF is given by the formula minus 4 into bracket GLS plus 4. So the GLS is minus 20 plus 4 is minus 16. Minus 16 into minus 4 is around 64% will be the left ventricular ejection fraction. Now here there are two pictures. Look at this. Here the visual EF appears, the top picture, visual EF appears to be pretty good, but the GLS is significantly reduced. It is minus 16. In the top bottom, the ventricle is dilated. This is a patient of severe AR. The ventricle appears to be a little depressed, but the global longitudinal strain is well preserved. So GLS gives you tremendous information about the left ventricular systolic function over and above that can be seen by ejection fraction alone. Now, this is an example of a 58-year-old man with mixed aortic valve disease. You can see ejection fraction is 62% over here, the 3D ejection fraction. But look at the global longitudinal strain. The global longitudinal strain is reduced. It is minus 14.5, telling you that this man should be subjected for aortic valve replacement as early as possible. Then comes the hemodynamics and intracardiac pressures. Not recognizing the limitations of estimation of RA pressure from IVC is another limitation. And here, how to correctly measure the IVC? In the subcostal view, you measure IVC around 3 centimeter proximal to the RA IVC junction, and then check on sniff about the collapsibility of IVC. And there are 3 measurements, as you all know. When IVC is less than 21, collapsing more than 50% with sniff, the RA pressure is around 3. When it is more than 21 and collapses less than 50%, the measurement is the RA pressure is around 15, and anything in between, the RA pressure is considered around 8. But there are caveats which are often forgotten. For example, patients on ventilator with a PEEP, IVC cannot be relied upon. Patients with multiple pleural or mediastinal drains, IVC cannot be relied upon. Patient with a tension pneumothorax, IVC cannot be relied upon. And patients with TIPS or large unilateral pleural effusion, these parameters of IVC as a surrogate for RA pressure goes haywire. What is then E by E prime? The E is the mitral efflow velocity, and E prime is the medial and lateral mitral annular tissue velocity. And the ratio of E to E prime, the average E to E prime, that is lateral annular E prime plus medial annular E prime divided by 2, that is the average E prime, is a surrogate for PCWP. And PCWP is given by the average E by E prime plus 3. So if your average E by E prime is 10, your PCWP will be around 13. Mistake 4, this we are practicing, the E by E prime, not understanding the limitation of E by E prime in estimation of PCWP. The limitations come when there is a fusion of E or A wave or unreliable measurement of E velocity. When does this happen? Tachycardia. In significant mitral regurg, the E will be elevated. In significant mitral stenosis, E will be elevated. In significant aortic regurgitation, E will be elevated. And therefore, you cannot rely on E by E prime as a surrogate for PCWP in these conditions. There are some other conditions where the mitral annular E prime velocity will be not reliably measured. And this is mitral annular calcification, previous mitral valve repair or replacement, localized mitral annular fibrosis, like for example, that happens in mitral annular fibrosis or calcification and left bundle branch block. So here is an example. This patient's IVC is dilated, not collapsing. The TR velocity is 4.2 meters per second. The PR velocity is also elevated, and the E by E prime is elevated. So you can virtually do a right heart catheterization by doing exact hemodynamic assessment, looking at IVC for RA pressure, TR peak for RV systolic pressure, pulmonary regurgitation for pulmonary artery diastolic pressure, and E by E prime for pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. This is called echocardiographic right heart catheterization. Can echocardiography conclusively confirm or rule out diagnosis of diastolic heart failure? Of course. We know that in men, as much as 42% of heart failures are pure HEPs, and in women, as many as two-thirds heart failures are with normal ejection fraction, so-called HEPF. So mistake number 5 is when you don't spend enough time to study the left ventricular diastolic function in a suspected case of HEPF. A patient has come breathless, he has come to your echo department, some physician has referred, he wants to tell you whether the breathlessness is cardiac or non-cardiac. All you need to do is my calculation of good, estimate the good mitral E velocity, E by A ratio, E by E prime, average of course, peak TR velocity and LA volume by two-dimensional echo. And then put those facts in perspective. Facts don't cease to exist because they are ignored. Just because you ignore diastolic function parameters, they are there in the patient and they are pointing at you about the disease process. So these are the ASC ESCVI guidelines 2016 for estimation of left ventricular diastolic function. This is the old way where you used to use normal grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3 diastolic dysfunction. You all are familiar with this. In grade 1, E is less than A, the slope, the deceleration time is increased. In grade 2, it resembles like a normal called pseudo-normal pattern. And in grade 3, deceleration time is very short. E by A is more than 1.5. Now, in patients with normal ejection fraction, you calculate average E by E prime. If that is more than 14, if your septal E prime is less than 7, lateral E prime is less than 10, peak TR more than 2.8, and LA volume index more than 34. If any of three or more of these parameters are positive, you are dealing with diastolic dysfunction. If less than 50% are positive, it is normal diastolic function. If only half of them are positive, it is indeterminate. And similar algorithm exists in patients with reduced GLS, normal EF with reduced GLS as well. So these algorithms are very easy to use. Just try practicing them in 10 patients and you will become master of it. And these algorithms should be put laminated on the walls of the echocardiography room for you to have a ready reference to them. So this is a patient of mine where you can see here the E velocity is 1.23 meters per second elevated. A is almost equal to E. The E prime, E by E prime is 23, significantly elevated. The peak TR velocity is elevated 2.82, just above the upper limit of normal, and the LA volume is big. So this tells you that this patient has significant diastolic dysfunction. Mistake 6, fully relying on diastolic function parameters only at rest. These are resting parameters which I told you, to exclude the diagnosis of HEPF. I will show a patient of mine. This is a 72-year-old gentleman, diabetic, hypertensive, started having exertional angina. Stress echo showed inducible ischemia in the LAD territory. The coronary angiogram showed proximal LAD 90% lesion, and I performed an angioplasty. Clap, clap, clap. Everything was well for 18 months after angioplasty. Then he started having exertional dyspnea. There was no angina whatsoever. Mind you, there was no angina. Stress echo was repeated, which showed an exercise capacity of 7 minutes. Patient developed breathlessness, but no angina, no ECG changes. I sent the patient for a CT coronary angiogram. The stent was very patent. Look at this. Then I did a dobutamine echo. Dobutamine echo showed excellent wall motion after dobutamine stress echo, no wall motion abnormality at all. That was a 2-chamber view, and this is a 2-chamber view. That was a 4-chamber view. But what happened? Just see. At rest, the E by E prime was 7. So the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure was 10. On exercise, the E by E prime went to 20 and exercise, and the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure went up to 23. So this patient at rest had normal diastolic function parameters, but on exertion, he has shown clearly significant diastolic dysfunction. And the same patient had an ejection fraction of 61%. 61%, my friends, on the biplane Simpson. But his GLS was minus 13. So this case is a classical highlight which tells you don't rely only on GLS, don't rely only on ejection fraction, measure GLS as well. And don't rely only on resting diastolic function parameters, go for exercise induced diastolic parameters, particularly E by E prime. There is an additive value of strain in HFpEF patients, and this relaxed trial has shown that impaired LVGLS is common in HFpEF patients. Biomarkers of wall stress and collagen synthesis are associated with impaired GLS in patients with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Mistake 7, missing constrictive pericarditis. This mistake all echocardiographers, including myself, have done in our younger days. I will show you 3 patients. All these 3 patients, left column, middle column, and right column, have the same degree of breathlessness, NYHA class 2B or 3A, you can say. Look at their mitral flow patterns, E more than A, E more than A, E more than A. They all look alike. But look at this patient who's normal, has a lung disease, E by E prime is normal. Here the E prime is significantly reduced. The E by E prime will be elevated. This is a patient of myocardial disease. In normal patient, mitral flow propagation velocity is normal. And in patients with myocardial disease, the mitral flow propagation velocity is reduced. On the right-hand side, I have a patient where the mitral flow pattern looks normal. E prime is exaggerated. And the mitral flow propagation velocity is also very, very rapid. This is a patient of constriction. Why constriction is missed? Look at thickened pericardium, septal bounce, increased respiratory excursions of IVS, atrial systolic notch, increase in mitral E by more than 25% on inspiration, plethoric IVC, lateral E prime less than medial E prime. This is called annulus paradoxus. Normal patients, the medial mitral E prime is higher than the lateral E prime. The medial E prime is lesser than the lateral E prime. Lateral is higher. When the lateral becomes lesser than medial, it is indication of constriction. And hepatic venous flow pattern will again guide you further. Mistake number 8, not understanding that every HFpEF is not the same. It has different phenotypes. In other words, when you don't separate precapillary pH from postcapillary or mixed pH, you will make a serious mistake. Because giving endothelin receptor antagonist and sildenafil to patients with left heart disease and pH can make them worse and increase their mortality. So it is important to separate precapillary pH from postcapillary pH. And there are 3 phenotypes of HFpEF. The common phenotypes are the type of patient which I showed you, exercise-induced left ventricular dysfunction. Second patient is resting left ventricular diastolic dysfunction with multiple risk factors like hypertension, coronary artery disease. They have type 3 diastolic dysfunction on echo. They have some degree of mitral regurg. Their LA is enlarged. They have peripheral edema and volume overload. And the right-sided group is the worst when they have pulmonary hypertension and right heart failure. What is precapillary pH? In precapillary pH, the pulmonary artery pressure is high, the LA pressure is low, and the transpulmonary gradient, which is the gradient between pulmonary artery diastolic pressure and the left atrial mean pressure or wedge pressure, is high. So Post-capillary PH patients are patients who have high pulmonary artery pressure, high pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, and normal, near normal transpulmonary gradient. And there are several differentiating features. In pulmonary arterial hypertension, you see normal EF, no LVH, no or at the most grade 1 diastolic dysfunction, normal left atrial size, increased RV size, impaired RV systolic function, and a systolic notch on the pulmonary artery pressure trace on the pulmonary pulse wave Doppler signal. In pulmonary venous hypertension, you have variable left ventricular ejection fraction. From mid-range to high range, there's left ventricular hypertrophy, there's increased left atrial size, bowing of interatrial septum to the right, normal RV size, and no systolic notching on the pulmonary arterial flow by pulse wave Doppler. So an idea came in the minds of people. My mentor, Dr. Daryl Burstow from Australia, he did a fantastic study, and I will tell you what this study is about. This pink bar is a normal patient where you have normal TR velocity, normal E by E prime. So TR by E by E prime, TR divided by E by E prime. This is called E-PLAR ratio, E-PLAR. This ratio will be close to 0.3. When you have pre-capillary pH, TR velocity will go up, E by E prime will remain normal, E-PLAR will shift higher, 0.55. If you have post-capillary pH, TR velocity will go high, but E by E prime will also go high, and the E-PLAR will be reduced as compared to normal individuals. This is so very important. So let me explain to you again, my friends, that in patients, normal patients, the E by E-PLAR will be close to minus 30. If E by E-PLAR or E-PLAR, that is TR peak velocity divided by E by E prime, is more than 0.30, it is pre-capillary pH. Less than 0.25 is clearly left heart disease or post-capillary pH. Between 0.26 to 0.30 is a gray zone. So with rising LA pressure, your E-PLAR will fall. With rising transpulmonary gradient, your E-PLAR will increase. So the cutoff is considered 0.26. Anything above 0.26 is a pre-capillary pH. Anything below 0.26 is a post-capillary pH. And this is a classical example. On the left side here, you have a patient with a mid-systolic notch on the pulmonary arterial pressure trace. E prime is normal, RA-RV are dilated, transpulmonary gradient is high, and this is pre-capillary pH. On the right side here, LV has concentric hypertrophy. The interatrial septum is bulging to the right atrium. E prime is reduced. The pulmonary artery systolic pressure trace does not show any notching, and there is a normal transpulmonary gradient suggestive of pulmonary venous hypertension. Noblest of pleasure is a joy of understanding. Mistake number 9, when you neglect the right ventricle. Assessing the right ventricular systolic function by an echocardiogram has never been better with the advent of 3D echo. In the older times, we used to use by TAPSE, RV free wall velocity or fractional area change, and now we have 3D echo and right ventricular global strain. So that will tell you whether the right ventricle is happy, sad, or sad and depressed. So at TAPSE, which you have been practicing so many years, anything less than 17 is abnormal. But the limitations are angle dependency and partial representation of right ventricular global function. The right ventricular fractional area change again depends on excellent acoustic window. Anything less than 35% is an abnormal fractional area change, abnormal right ventricular systolic function. The right ventricular, the tricuspid annular velocity of less than 9.5 is again suggestive of reduce right ventricular global systolic function. And this is the right ventricular 3D volume estimation by a 3D echo. The global longitudinal strain has come in the vogue now for calculation of right ventricular systolic function. The normal global longitudinal strain for right ventricle is anywhere between -19 to -24. So the septum is not considered as a part of right ventricle. You look at the free wall strain and look at this free wall strain, -23, -26, -28, which is completely normal strain. Right ventricular function has prognosis in HFrEF. It has a prognostic implication in HFrEF. This study done in the olden days have shown that as the right ventricular ejection fraction becomes lower and lower, the prognosis become worse and worse over months of follow-up in patients with HFrEF. So in patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, if your right ventricle is also diseased, right ventricular systolic dysfunction is severe, the mortality becomes higher and higher. Right ventricular dysfunction also has prognostic implication in HFpEF. So if you have patients with TAPSE less than 14 and ejection fraction normal or HFpEF, look at the mortality rates. So the right ventricular dysfunction or reduced TAPSE is a predictor of mortality and NT-proBNP levels, etc. in patients with HFpEF as well. And this is a very important thing. In HFpEF patients, we really never look at right ventricle, which we should be looking at. Mistake number 10, not looking at additional strain patterns for understanding disease process. So everything happens for a reason, and that reason is usually physics. So here I'm showing you two examples, the patient number left and the patient number right. Let me go to this patient, 53-year-old male, left bundle branch block on the ECG, ejection fraction close to 30% on a 3-dimensional echo. Look at this. His circumferential strain is grossly reduced, but the radial strain is relatively preserved. So you know that this patient's EF is 30% despite a large dilated left ventricle because his radial strain is relatively preserved. And these are the normal values of global longitudinal strain, radial strain, circumferential strain, and area strain. However, radial strain, circumferential strain are not yet standardized for clinical use, but they can give you a lot of insight into the pathology involved in the disease process. For example, in amyloid cardiomyopathy, the longitudinal strain will go down first, the radial strain will go down the last. In some other forms of cardiomyopathy like sarcoid, it is a radial strain which will go down equally as compared to longitudinal strain right from the word go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are what we repeatedly do. So, I request you to practice your echocardiography in heart failure patients effectively with attitude, accuracy, passion, diligence, and a fire in your belly for excellence. And therefore, I always tell my students, excellence is therefore not an act, but a habit. Please maintain that. Thank you for your patient attention.